Mr. Tim is the co-founder and president of Cottage Garden Incorporated, the top musical gift company in North America. He has worked for Kellogg's, the National FFA, and the USA Today. In 1996, Mr. Tim co-founded Cottage Garden out of his garage, and then doubled sales every year for the next 6 years. In 2008, Cottage Gardens was named the Small Business Association's Business of the Year in Indiana, and runner-up for the National Small Business of the Year. As a serial entrepreneur, Mark has started and sold 3 successful businesses over the past 15 years through strategic equity events. Let's give him a big Texas welcome, Mr. Mark Tim.
Take this out. I have to tell you that I'm not sure if at any point in my entrepreneurial experience I've ever worked 9 to 5. Although I was thinking about it, I did work from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. the next day a few times, and I have worked from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., so I guess that does count. Well, I tell you, thank you for having me here. Very glad to be here. I've enjoyed the other speakers very much. And I have to tell you that I get the chance to speak. My wife lets me speak a few times a year, but I haven't spoken in front of a lot of educators for a while. In fact, I haven't spoken to school in quite some time. I do remember, however, the last time I spoke in school, okay? Because Mike and I have a little bit in common. We have a lot of kids. I have 6 kids. And so with that, big fan of public education, but I've gotten the opportunity to do career day several times. And my youngest was the last one I did career day for a few years ago. And I'm in school, and I decide I'm going to get there a little early, like I like to do before any event, and I want to just check it out. I want to see what's going on, get a lay for the land. And I'm sitting in the back of the classroom, and this is a first grade classroom. So I saw some hands of some first grade teachers over here. So I'm sitting back there, and in preparation for the career day experience, one of the teachers said, does anybody in this classroom know what they want to do with their life? Whoa, this is going to be fun. But man, no more did she ask the question than a hand shot up in the air and said, my name is Dan. Someday I'd like to grow up to be a man. I'd like to learn to fly a plane someday if I can. I think I can, so that's my plan. I'm like, the first grade. Now, some of these teachers already know where this is going, because there were some girls in that classroom, and they weren't about to be outdone by Dan. So the next hand that went up in the air was a young lady, and she stood up and said, my name is Sadie. Someday I'd like to grow up to be a lady. I'd like to have a baby someday if I can. I think I can, so that's my plan. At this point, I'm looking for the door to get out of here. But then it happened, and it always happens. There's this little hand on the back row that just raises up ever so sheepishly. And he stands up, and he says, my name is Sam. I'd also like to grow up to be a man. I don't care to fly a plane like Dan, but I'd sure like to help Sadie with her plan. And you teach these first graders, and they're headed your way. So who am I? That was a wonderful introduction there, but let me tell you who I really am. Because what really matters to me is that I am the father of 6 amazing kiddos. You got to see that in my introduction up there. In fact, my beautiful bride and I decided that 6 wasn't enough, so we took in our niece and nephew, and so we are now a family of 10, and I'm here to tell you publicly that 8 is enough. It is enough. But it is the most beautiful and amazing chaos every day, every morning, every night in our household, without a doubt. I am also a husband of a beautiful wife. In fact, I am the CEO of the company that I run, but I am the president of the Tim family, because we all know who the CEO is, and she's sitting right back there. All right? Now you can clap for that, ladies. Absolutely. I am the son of 2 wonderful parents, and I'm fortunate to be here with family. My brother is here, Ron, my sister-in-law, Tia, and my little nephew, Bryce. Although he's not very little, but I still think he's little. So I love my family. I've got a great family. I've got great kids, but I have also been very blessed in my lifetime. I have traveled the world. I have met presidents and first ladies. I have had business success that I couldn't have ever imagined. And the question becomes, and I ask it of myself, how? Why? My life is filled with defining moments. Defining moments. Many of those defining moments happen in the hallways and the classrooms of my public education. And as I was preparing to talk to you today, I started reflecting on some of those defining moments. And one defining moment just rocketed to the top. Now, what is a defining moment? It's that moment you can look back to in your life where you made a critical decision and your life was never the same. That moment happened in the 8th grade. Now, any of you have 8th graders? I'm sorry. I have 2. Any of you teach 8th graders? God bless you. Okay? So, what is the one thing that is on the mind of every 8th grade boy? Girls! That's right. So in the 8th grade, here I am, I've discovered girls. And they're nice. And I discovered that there are boys with these girls. And I see them together, holding hands. And then I see these boys sometimes, before they go off to class, give the girls a big old smooch. And I thought to myself, I gotta give me one of them. So a couple months passed and I did. She checked the box that said, will you go with me? And it was second period on a Friday. So man, by 3rd period, who was holding hands now? Yeah. Now, I wanted to be patient and not seem too eager on the smoochy thing. So I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I thought maybe 5th period would be about long enough. So 5th period rolls around, and I walk my little female friend to her locker, and she gets some books, and right before, we're about to part ways to go to class, I give her a big old smooch. Mwah! That felt pretty good. But I looked around to see if anybody had seen the new cool kid with the girlfriend here. And just as I looked around, this hand came from the sky. It was the shape of a baseball mitt. And it grabbed me by the back of the collar. And it picked me up. And my feet were dangling off the floor. And it carried me down the hallway. And then it set me down. And this big man looked at me and said, just exactly what do you think Larry would think about what happened back there? Now, for those of you who haven't figured out, Larry is my father. And he wouldn't have thought too much about what happened back there. And so then he looked at me and he said, son, do you know what character is? No. He said, well, let me tell you something. Larry Tim is a man of character. I am absolutely certain that he has shown you respect for females, that he has showed you dignity, that he has shown you honor. And let me tell you something, and don't ever forget it. Your reputation, young man, in this school will be defined largely by your actions in these hallways. And if I ever see you doing that again, we'll call Larry together. That was a defining moment. No more smoochy for me. After I cleaned myself up in the bathroom, I went back to class. Now, I did mention to you that this was a Friday. Okay? So it's a Friday. On Monday starts a new rotation. In the 8th grade, we rotated to different elective disciplines. So my elective for the new 9 weeks was ag class. Career and technical education, ag class. So I walk into ag class, and you can imagine my surprise when I walk into ag class and see the very man who carried me down the hallway standing up in front of the classroom. Now, being sly, I tried to sneak around the back and slide into the back row, but yeah. He says, well, if it isn't Romeo. And for the next 9 weeks, I got to be referred to as Romeo. But I didn't care, because something happened in that class that had not happened to me before in my educational experience. You see, this man taught about agriculture, no doubt about it. But he was way ahead of the curve on the whole STEM education, because I was learning math, and I was learning science, and I was learning biology, and I was loving it. But I was learning something else too. I learned a lot about ag, but I also learned about character, and I learned about leadership, and I learned about communications, I learned about goal setting, and I was hooked. So this 8th grade academic honors student signs up for agriculture class as his top pick. And we listed the rest of the classes as maybe you do here when you're selecting classes. But something happened. When I got my schedule for my freshman year, I didn't have ag. In the very slot that ag was supposed to be was Latin. And so I went to the guidance counselor and I said, hey, I think there's a mistake. I put ag class as number 1 and I'm in Latin. And they said, oh, Mark, there's no mistake. You're in the honors program and Latin and ag are the same time, so really it would be more of a benefit for you to be in Latin. And I said, oh, I want to be in ag so bad. Is there anything we can do to change it? And he said, well, I'm not changing it until you go home and discuss this with your parents, because I'm sure they'll understand. So I went home and I discussed it with my parents, and they absolutely understood. In fact, when I got done discussing it, my dad said, son, I understand. And then he got up, went and called the principal and said, we need to meet tomorrow morning at 7:30. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, the next morning, I was in ag. Just like that. Because they understood that I wanted to be there and I was passionate about it. And they wanted me to be there as well. I got into ag, and as part of the ag curriculum was also an organization called FFA. And I soaked up everything that ag had to offer, and I got involved in everything I could with FFA. I did every activity, every contest, I went on every trip. This little boy from Fillmore, Indiana, the world had started to open up to him through this educational experience. And so what ended up happening was that by the time I was a sophomore, my chapter selected me to go to Washington, D.C. Now, I had never traveled so far in my life, and here I am going to Washington, D.C., where the President of the United States lives. And I go out to Washington, D.C., and I meet other kids just like me from all over the country. All kinds of neat kids. And I hit it off with all of them, and we're exploring the nation's capital. And my roommate was Steve Hicks from Iowa. I still remember him. I'm still in contact with some of those kids that I met between my sophomore and junior year. And I remember being in official dress. For those of you that know FFA official dress, the blue corduroy jacket. And we're in the blue corduroy jackets, and we're walking down the mall in Washington, D.C. Now, this is not a shopping mall. For those of you who've been to Washington, D.C., that's the Smithsonian Mall. And we're walking down the street, and all of a sudden we see this guy up in front of us, and he's dressed in a 3-piece suit, and it looks like he's walking straight towards us, and sure enough he is. He stops us and says, boys, what are you doing in those jackets? It's hot out here. And we said, well, we're part of the FFA, and this is our official dress, and we're very proud to wear this. And he looks at us and says, well, boys, my name is Mr. Cobb, and I'm president of one of the largest banks in New York City. What might your names be? Well, man, my heart started racing, and I thought, I got to summon some of that courage and leadership that FFA taught me. And I looked up at him and said, my name is Mark Tim, and I'm from Indiana. And he looks at my friend, and my friend starts to stutter a little bit, and he says, my name's Steve Hicks. And he looks at my friend, and he says, son, do you know what we do with Hicks in New York City? And Steve looked down, and he found his courage that FFA had given him, and he looked up and says, mister, I have no idea what you do with Hicks in New York City, but I know what my grandpappy did with Cobbs back in Iowa. This organization took a little farm boy from Indiana to Washington, D.C., where the President of the United States was at. I thought, I'm going to see how far this organization will take me. And it took me, I became the chapter president, I became the state president, I became the district president, and I ultimately, in 1990, became the national FFA president. And I got to travel all over the world representing American agriculture and young people and leadership. In fact, during my year as the national FFA president, I traveled in 43 states, 5 foreign countries, and Texas. I could never decide if that's from a state or a country, so you get your own identification. I met presidents, I met President George Bush Sr. 3 times, introduced him on national television, I went to work for him later. It was a phenomenal experience, and all because this 8th grade honor student signed up for a career and technical education class. How cool is that? Now, I have to be honest with you, I loved all of the classes. I took the business classes I could take, I took the ag classes I could take, I was in the business organizations as well. I loved all of it. Ironically, the only B I got my senior year was in business communications. Now, how funny is that? I got the chance to speak in front of my business communications teacher a few years ago, and we had a good laugh over that. So, I look back at my time in the classrooms and hallways, and I can tell you without a doubt, being at that moment, at that time, was a gift. Being in that high school was a gift. Signing up for agriculture class was a gift. Now, you say, how do you know it was a gift? Well, I happen to be an expert on gifts. The company that I run and operate and own is one of the largest gift companies in the U.S. We're the largest musical gift company in America. We supply over 1 million gifts to people through our retailers all over the world. So I know a little bit about gifts, but it's not because I know about gifts or because I say that I had a gift in high school. I actually learned at a young age, at 19 years old, what it means to truly receive and give a meaningful gift. It was when I got the chance to travel overseas to Japan. I am on my international experience as a national officer. I'm 19 years old, and I am told I need to go live with a Japanese family. Now, there was only one problem. I didn't speak Japanese, and they didn't speak any English. So we did our best to communicate. They were great hosts. They fed me well. That's the international language, by the way, is food. You know, you go anywhere around the world, the first thing they want to do is feed you and feed you and feed you, and they fed me very well. Now, this couple had a little boy named Lee. Now, Lee and I hit it off right away because if you'll notice with little kids, they don't care what language you speak because they don't speak really that language. They can tell how you feel. They can tell how you think. So Lee and I hit it off really well. In fact, this particular home, and it's common in Japanese homes, doesn't have central heat. So they would, when you sat down at the kitchen table, they would have these big blankets and you would pull over your lap and there was heaters underneath there. Or you sat in the living room, they would have a blanket you pulled over and there was a heater underneath there. So that's how you heat it. And at night, where Lee would sleep is in the family room where it was warmest, and they would lay down these big blankets. So I would sleep down there with Lee, and they'd lay these blankets down, and then we would lay down. Lee would come downstairs, and he had this little blue whale, and he slept every night with this blue whale curled up really tight underneath his arm. And he would curl up beside me and go to sleep. And we had a phenomenal experience. It was a real life-changing, another defining moment in my life. And so it came to the end of the experience, and I had been told that it's customary and a nice gesture to give gifts to the host family. So I brought some gifts, very American gifts. I bought, baseball hats and a t-shirt, and I brought some pens and some buttons and very tchotchke kind of things that we often give in America. And so I passed them all out, and everybody was wearing their hats and wearing their shirts, and they were all so happy and very appreciative, and I thought I had done such a wonderful thing. And then I noticed one by one they kind of disappeared. And the first one to come back was the father, the host father. And he came back, and what he came back with, I actually have here today, was this. It was a bird made out of Japanese coins. And what I found out as he explained to me through the interpreter is that this was given to him by his best friend when he was 16 years old. His best friend subsequently passed away, and it was the only thing he had from him. And he handed that to me as my gift. And then the mother came back, and the mother brought me a kimono and asked me to give that to my mother. And then shared that it was the kimono that she wore when she was married. And then the grandmother came back. And the grandmother came back, and she was holding this stone, which happened to have been taken off of a mountain during the World War as a raw stone. And then her husband had it polished down into this beautiful stone that you see here, mounted on another piece of the stone. And she came out and gave this to me. Her husband had departed her a few years earlier, and it was one of her most prized and treasured possessions from her husband. I was in awe, complete awe. I'd never experienced something even remotely close to this in my lifetime. And then I looked around, and I couldn't find Lee. And next thing you know, I hear his little pitter-patter down the stairs. And he comes walking down the stairs carrying this. And he walks up to me, and he puts it in my lap. And I knew that regardless of how awesome these other gifts were, nobody was giving a greater gift than him. And I started to give it back to him. And tears just started flowing down his face. He just started bawling. And I realized that I needed to accept this gift, and I accepted it to him, only to find out that the reason he started crying was not because he was going to miss this whale. It was because he had witnessed giving in its purest form, and he was afraid that his gift wasn't enough. And that's why I was giving it back. But in reality, we all know, if you've had a 5-year-old and they sleep with something at night, there is no more precious possession in their world than that. And he handed that over to me. So teachers, educators, administrators, when I stand up here and say that your opportunity to teach these young people is a gift, I mean it's that kind of a gift. You have the chance, just like these other speakers have talked about, to mold, to shape, to influence, to impact so many young people out there. You have been given that gift. Now what you do with that gift is your gift to them. I heard a saying, and it instantly stuck in my mind. And I want to share that with you here because I think it's very reflective of what I'm trying to get across and what happened to me. And the quote was, "Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone." And I know sometimes as teachers or educators or as parents, we feel like we can't make a difference in everybody's life, so why try? We can't impact 150 kids, so why put the effort into it? We can't change the lives of 30 kids in our classrooms, so why should we work so hard? But I'm standing up here as a result of a man who did for one what I'm sure he would have done for everyone. And then he stepped back and let the fireworks begin. And once you do that for one, do it again. And do it again. These things have a way of becoming contagious. And you say, well, how do you do this? I mean, is it really that easy to do? For me, it was. It took a grab by the collar, a kick in the pants, an exposure to something really cool. It wasn't this most incredible event. It took a defining moment, and you can provide that for these kids. In fact, I'll give you a real-world example of it. How many of you know the name, have heard the name Roger Bannister? Anybody? Okay, first man to run under a 4-minute mile. Did it in 1954. Now, they started tracking how fast the human man could run a mile back in 1870. And in fact, they decided and concluded, some experts, medical experts, that it was physically impossible for a human person to run under a 4-minute mile because they literally felt their heart would explode. Then in 1954, Roger Bannister did it. He did it. But see, here's the fun part. Took 70, 80 years since they started recording it for Roger Bannister to do it, and then it only took 49 days for the second person to do it. In fact, in 1954, 7 people ran under a 4-minute mile, and since 1954, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have ran under a 4-minute mile. So what changed? Did the human body change? Did our hearts just get so much stronger that we could do it? You know what changed. One thing changed. Right here. You are teaching thousands of Roger Bannisters. You are teaching thousands of Mark Tims. They're sitting out in their classrooms. They just need somebody to help them see that change, to make that change. See, I stand up here and I was introduced as a business owner. Most of the introduction here was about business success. But I can tell you this, I am standing on this stage today because of the gift that was my 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Cotton. Because of the gift that was my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Clark. Because of the gift that was my principal, Mr. Tilford. The gift that was my English teacher, Mrs. Dobson. And clearly the gift that was Mr. Bodorf, my ag teacher. That's why I'm standing up here today. Because they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And isn't that your job? To unlock that potential, to see something in these kids that they may not see themselves. And I believe if you'll do that, if you will do that, you can make a difference. And listen, we need you to make a difference. Because these young people do not represent 100% of the population, but rest assured, they represent 100% of the future. And that's not just their future, that's your future as well. Now, I want to show a video to you. It's part of my wrap-up here. And it's a video, it's not as eloquently produced as the video that you saw, when this whole thing kicked off. This was produced in my living room with my children. And they are telling a story, and this story is a story that I believe exists in every single school across this country. The tragedy of the story and the opportunity of this story. Please watch.
And I refuse to believe that I'm part of
believe they are part of a lost generation. But you can choose to reverse it. You, the educators of these young people, can choose to reverse it. And it will make all the difference in the world. You do for one what you wish you could do for everyone, and you do it over and over again, and you will make a difference. I promise you that. In fact, I'm late to social media. I recently signed up and got a Twitter account just in the last few weeks. And I looked at my Twitter yesterday, and there was a quote. And by the way, the last time I gave this speech and I used this video, there were some educators that wanted a copy of it to use it themselves for their kids. If you somehow are more technologically savvy than me and you can find me on Twitter, I will post this on my Twitter account tomorrow when I get back. It's Mark A. Tim, Timm. You find me there, I'll post it tomorrow and you can have access to it. What I saw on my Twitter account was a quote, and it said, "Education is the most powerful weapon that can be used to change the world." And you guys are on the front line of that battle. And you have at your disposal the most powerful weapon to change the world. And I can tell you, as a parent, as a father, as a businessman, as a son, this world needs some changing. And it can start right here. It can start in your classroom. I'm going to close with a quote from personally one of my favorite leaders of history and one of my favorite speakers. His name was Winston Churchill. And he said, "There comes a time in every man's life, a magnificent moment, when he's tapped on the shoulder and asked to do something truly remarkable. What a shame if that moment finds that man unprepared or unqualified for what could have been his finest hour." Ladies and gentlemen, I am that man. This year is your moment. The day is today. What a gift. The time is now. Don't waste it. And the person is you. Never forget it. Thank you.